How does somebody go about getting all this sort of stuff done then? I mean, you know, if you're a startup, you could be a sole marketer that's responsible for this. You could be a founder, perhaps working with some freelancers. But, you know, from what you're seeing then, time is a limiting factor, isn't it? Let's be honest, that's not changing. So what are the options that people have got in terms of a getting stuff done perspective?
Yeah, I'll give the options, but I'm also going to give you like what the actual secret sauce is. So the options are, there's actually many options. You can, of course, hire a full-time team. You as a marketer, so that's from a founder perspective, but let's say you're a marketer and like, you know, you can also outsource to contractors and freelancers. Founders can also outsource to contractors and freelancers. There's hiring agencies. And usually agencies are amazing at execution, or at least they should be. And those agencies can be more full service. So they offer many different services. The agencies can also be specialist. Maybe they only do SEO, or they only do content marketing, or they only do paid acquisition. Then there's doing it yourself, which comes with its own really fun bag of interesting things that comes with that. But then there is also, you can hire consultancies. So Demand Maven is technically a consultancy. Do we do execution? Yes, but we're primarily strategy. There's consultancies, and then having the consultancy manage freelancers or manage the team. Like there's ways to kind of bring on like whatever it is that you need. And none of these options, I would say, are ever wrong. I don't think there's ever any wrong option. And I think a lot of teams get kind of caught up in that because they think like, oh, I can't make a mistake. And they're mostly right. But the mistake is almost never in, I'm not going to say who you hire, because sometimes you can hire like providers that are not great, but the mistake is almost always in like just being realistic about what it is that you actually need and can afford. Like that is, you know, I think mistake number one. And then mistake number two is not actually having a process to enable growth or execution in any kind of way from the get-go. I'll start with not really knowing like what we really need. So the truth is like, depending on your own skill set, whether you're a founder or a marketer, depending on your skill set and depending on your bandwidth, your budget, the scope of what you need done, any and all of these options could be great. And I think it's just a matter of like just getting brutally honest about what do you need in the short term, and also what's the long-term effect of this. It doesn't make sense to bring on an agency, for example, for less than 6 months. Like, can you actually afford that? Like, what would they be doing? Blah, blah, blah. But then also maybe it's like, you know, you're a kick-ass marketer and you're amazing at these things, but you're not so great at demand gen. Or maybe you're new to account-based marketing and you really want to learn from another provider. So you could bring on, you know, an ABM agency, or you could bring on a demand gen agency, or you could bring on, you know, an SEO agency, or whatever it is. And that's a way to kind of fill in, you know, whatever gaps you have. I think from a founder perspective, I think there's a little bit more, in some ways, pressure / there's a little bit more, there's a few more challenges, but just because you've got to be pretty good at managing to bring on either a marketing team or even contractors and freelancers. You have to be a little bit less good at managing when it comes to agencies. But the tricky part, of course, with hiring anyone, whether it's an agency, a contractor, freelancer, a marketer, full-time, part-time, whatever, is, of course, you've got to be able to trust like what you're getting. So a little bit trickier, I think, in some ways for the founder. But being a marketer, usually I feel like we're pretty good at identifying like, oh, okay, like here's what we need, and here's like how best to staff the team. Mistake number two, or let's say pitfall number two, because I don't want anyone to feel bad in case they've done this, because, you know, we've all been there. But with pitfall number two, honestly, none of this matters. And this is kind of like the aha moments that I've had with clients, you know, just over the years. But it almost like doesn't really matter who you hire, if I'm being honest, because if you don't have a process for executing against growth or marketing anyway, it doesn't really matter who you bring on, because they literally can't execute. Like there's no way for them to execute well. They might do stuff, meaning like they might go build the landing page, they might go launch the campaign, or they might go write the copy or whatever it is. But unless you have a process for deploying that in a meaningful way, it doesn't really matter what like execution like actually gets done. So what I find is teams that win at marketing and growth, usually they are ones that meet regularly. They report on the wins. They also retrospect on the not so great things, on either the losses or the, oh, this didn't work. And they are constantly in discussion about opportunities and also gaps to fill. They are also usually pretty consistent about doing some form of customer research, in addition to really aligning and operationalizing around customer success. When those things all come together, they have a really solid process for executing. They have a really solid process internally for thinking about strategy, reflecting on strategy, and then like actually literally executing. When those things are all aligned, that's when you can really throw any resource into the mix. When you don't have that, what you get is you get contractors, freelancers who are executing, but they don't really know like how it tiers up into the ultimate vision or like how it actually impacts goals. You also don't know if you're not measuring anything, and then therefore can't really tell like the contractor, freelancer, or marketing person or whoever like what to do. Agencies will go a mile a minute if you give them space and time to. And if they are not strategically aligned with where the company is at, with who the customer is and the journey, then they're going to execute a bunch of stuff that doesn't ultimately move the needle. And this is really the drawback, I think, to bringing on any kind of team. But at the same exact time, if you've got those things together, then you're going to be able to execute against growth, marketing, whatever it is, and it's going to be great. You're going to have your challenges, but you're going to have really good ways to overcome them because you've got a good process. And I think like process is really where it all comes down to. If there's no process, like it's just a bunch of stuff like thrown into a tumbler, and then maybe we get polished rocks and maybe we don't, you know? So it's like it's a coin toss.